Come on, let's talk 4-H, head, heart, health, and hands.
4-H!
Well, folks, we are so excited to have you join us on podcast number 4. And we've got a really spectacular guest with us today. I'm so excited to share Tracy Dietrich with all of our 4-H fraternity. And of course, Tracy is no stranger to the 4-H world. Her and her husband, Bill, and their entire family have been 4-H alumni themselves. Their kids were in 4-H. She's been a 4-H volunteer extraordinaire. And now we have the privilege of have her working with 4-H Alberta and focusing on a lot of our provincial programming and doing a lot of really cool things with projects and resources in her role in the programming team. So the theme behind today, Tracy, is to talk about rules. So this is often one of our most talked about hot topics that we have as staff and volunteers is when we have club leaders and show committee chairs start to really dive into their roles and responsibilities for event management. And they want clarity on rules, or they want the opportunity to add rules and get permission for those additional rules and so on. So throughout this podcast, our objective is to talk about rule management and the kind of tips and tricks behind how we can be the most efficient with rules. And so that's really one of our main objectives today. And one of the things that we also want to ask ourselves is really 4 questions. And that is, how are rules going to make the member experience better? And then who's making the rule, who's interpreting the rule, and who's enforcing the rule? And I think those are kind of the 4 basic questions to ask yourself when you're responsible for any kind of policy or bylaw update or rules and regulations to the show or constitution stuff, anything like that is think to yourself, is this rule necessary and how will it be interpreted and so on. So I guess how I'd like to start is just ask you to share your favorite parts of 4-H and why it has been such a super experience for you to end up working for 4-H Alberta. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've always looked at the 4-H member and how much a 4-H member grows. We can go to the communication activity and, the first year we see a lot of kids that are upset. They don't want to do it. And then, the next year and the next year to watch them grow and just get that much better. And of course, now having the privilege of being at more provincial programs, I get to see those kids a lot of times grow from teenagers into young adults that are doing amazing things and have turned into just amazing people that can fill all of our cups right up, because they, the one thing that 4-H teaches them is grace and kindness, and they really portray that at all of the programs that we are a part of. Those kids, they want to be there, and they are really great members that have grown and have got all of the 4-H values.
Yeah, that's very similar to our a previous podcast where we had Callan and Hiller here, and it's just remarkable to see the confidence and the reputation that comes with 4-H kids that have been in 4-H. And so when you're 9 and 10 years old, they have a little bit of advantage. And then just as you're saying, as they turn into young adults and parents themselves, and we see them with their kids in 4-H, just how incredible the 4-H program is in youth development. Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Achievement Day. I'm going to assume that a lot of your questions about rules, especially as it relates to livestock projects, are kind of centered around Achievement Day. Would that be fair?
Yeah, showing and Achievement Days and
making sure everything is handled. So when we talk about an Achievement Day, there's like a whole passel of responsibilities that clubs have with this, whether it's a livestock or a multi-club or life skills or anything. There's lots to planning Achievement Day. So just to run through a few things, we need to initiate an event budget.
Mm-hmm.
We have to pick a venue and confirm that. We need to confirm all the officials. Lots of people are a big part of that day. Yep. We need to manage awards. There's lots of administrative tasks that are are most appropriately delegated to those detail people, which is really good. And then there's the actual management of the day. And then if we're doing our job, there's the evaluation and feedback. But tell me some of the common themes that you hear or questions that you get around that Achievement Day time from club leaders or volunteers, and some of the tactics that you take to really ensure that it's okay. We don't need to outrule ourselves and just get back to basics. So walk me through how you manage some of those calls with leaders really anxious about rules in general.
Sure. So I think a lot of times they're just, it's like they don't want to allow something to happen that is good. Sometimes they want to punish the kid. And I think a lot of times it does go back to maybe some personal views and not necessarily looking at what they want to achieve, right? Because we should all be wanting the 4-H member to achieve, and that of course we know that they need their Achievement Day. And so let's look at ways to positively engage something that, their engine wouldn't start, or, they missed the meeting before and that was mandatory. But let's listen to their story. Let's see what the big deal was. That's mostly the questions I get, is there's always somebody in the club that wants to go against a child that has, maybe not had successes getting up to that point. Mm-hmm. And then we just really have to look at, the whole picture, and you have to hear everybody's story really to figure out why or what's going on.
What is behind the root of the problem or whatnot. One of the things that Dustin and I talked about in a previous podcast was meeting members where they're at. And so if we're making rules that is trying to create a very linear playing field, that's not necessarily where every kid is at.
No. And
so we talk about what are the goals of each family. So when we look at what their goals are objectively, some of them are they want to get through the day without having a panic attack. Some kids want to place in the top third. Some kids want to advance in grooming. Some kids want to have their engines start and run smoothly, and so on with life skills. So they have different goals. So how do we meet those kids in those places and allow them to have different, or encourage them rather, to have different goals, while also being mindful that there's a contingent that want to limit opportunities by making everything even and the same and assuming those goals are the same?
I think we have to realize that all kids are different, like you've said. And as leaders, we should be able to take any type of child, any type of 4-H member, and listen to them good enough to understand their goals, right? Because I think for a lot of those kids, their parents, because they're in 4-H, so their parents are involved too, that, they have said, well, you may never, but what is your goal? Like, you might never or, you'll never have the best, or let's work on that, or, to get it better. And hopefully between them and their parents, they can, achieve the goals, and that they're, it is in the front of everybody's record book. Like, what is your goal this year? Yeah. right? So when we're filling in our record books, let's be mindful of that. And as club leaders, maybe sometimes they need to look back at the book just to remind them of what the members' goal is, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And I think having those conversations, like you said, understanding what the members' expectations are and what the family's expectations are. So if we've successfully done that, and now we're in Achievement Day and there's a conflict, and there's two leaders that are losing their minds, and there's parents that are really upset, and there's kids confused because there's adults angry. What is your coaching on how to bring a sense of common reason to that? How would you coach leaders through that tumultuous situation in the moment?
Oh, I don't know. Because I can get pretty, like myself, I can be pretty, I can't think of the word, but that I might be the one way too, right? Like not looking at the full picture, but we have to come to common ground, because a lot of times those problems are bigger, like they're leader problems or whatever. It's not the running of the day or anything. It's got nothing to do with the 4-H members. It'll be something that 4-H leaders thought was breached, right?
Right.
Probably the biggest thing that I have problems with is when we always seem to have our most problems in the beef project. That is where it is. So I will use that analogy, right? When we have a kid that has a calf that's too wild, or we have a 4-H member that loses a heifer or loses a cow or calf, I don't know why we have to punish the 4-H member, right? Because there can be kids that work every day with those steer calves, and there'll be a switch that'll flip, and there's nothing they can do. I've seen it happen to the best cattlemen in the world, and I've seen it happen to the worst cattlemen.
Well, and that's life. That is livestock production.
That's right. And that's probably the most frustrating thing for me, is that we keep saying in the beef project, we want our kids to have real life experiences. So a real life experience is losing a calf on a cow, or losing a heifer. That is real life stuff. But why are we going to punish that child 4-H member by not letting them replace it, or think that they have to bring an open cow to an Achievement Day? That's not real life. No. Chances are that cow would be sold, but a lot of times 4-H projects, there's a graft that happens, and then next year the cow will calve. Why isn't that 4-H member allowed to bring that cow back?
Yeah.
That is real life.
we're focusing on wanting to open doors, not close them.
Yes. That's what the focus should definitely be.
So if our leaders and parents are sitting in a situation and they're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do, one of our best pieces of advice is this opening doors or closing doors? Mm-hmm. Okay. I like that.
Well, because a lot of times that's why they don't come back, right? Yeah. Because their goals weren't met, and the doors were shut, on them. And we're finding more and more 4-H families that join 4-H with beef or horse might not necessarily have grown up there, but there is a parent that wants their child to be part of this. And it is really hard for them to get information to be able to move ahead, because somebody thinks that they're the keeper and they're not going to share. Yeah. And I mean, as a cattleman, I don't understand why you would do that. Why are you trying to limit the knowledge to pass on to another person, right? Yeah. Like that, I can't fathom that. Like I've had a few phone calls from across the province, and they've told me their story, and I've said, I wish that you lived closer to me, because it's not very often that you get a family in a 4-H club that wants to learn. Yeah. Right? A lot of them are there because, well, the family, the siblings before, or the parents did it, and so now you're going to do it, and it's passed down, and those people are really great. But the ones that want to learn, this should still be a place for them.
And the opportunity for that is so valuable because those folks that have the intellectual knowledge and experience can share, as well as the folks that are wanting to receive it are really excited to receive that information.
Yeah.
So let's put ourselves in another dicey situation at an achievement day. And this one has happened, I'm sure, in a lot of places. We've had firsthand experience with it. So you've got a family that is like in the show world. So they're purebred producers. They don't have to be, but often they are. And their kids have all the projects. So they've got a herd, they've got a steer and a carcass. And so they're very busy. So they call on some friends that are in 4-H and other clubs to come to Achievement Day to give them a hand and to help all the other 4-H members. And so in the moment, some leaders may sit there and go, oh my goodness, this is giving these kids a distinct advantage. They're hiring some professionals, even though they may be 15, 16 years old. And we got to put a stop to this right now. And this is not a good situation, versus thinking about, what are the opportunities? So if you had somebody call you in the heat of the moment, mad as a hatter at this situation of a professional helper, what would be your recommendations to them to get through that positively?
So I think they need to be very careful about what they define as professional. That's my number one thing, because I really, there's no card handed out to these kids or anything. They've maybe, gotten better at their skill because they have spent some time watching, their peers or whatever. But at the same time, if you have a group of kids that get to watch somebody else fit or to help, get cattle ready, and I would dare to say that those kids wouldn't help your kids if you wanted, right? Yeah. So it's just one of those situations where you have to calm them down somehow and say, what are you worried about the most?
Yeah.
Right? Are you worried that their cattle are going to look better? And if you have kids that have multiple projects, they're interested enough that they're going to get better. And having somebody there that you deem as professional is not going to make them better. And
no.
It's kind of a silly thing.
Really. So we're always encouraging kids to collaborate, work together, learn together, grow together, compete together, celebrate together. So one perspective on this would be, again, we're going to open this door. The more kids that participate in an achievement day contribute to greater success and growth in their experience, the better. Mm-hmm. So one would suggest that it's not the time in the middle of an achievement day to start throwing around new rules or new interpretation of rules.
Absolutely. No, that's not the time. Let's just work with this. I don't think that they're going to do anything that's going to necessarily make that animal, or they're just, the 4-H members are just trying to get through a very exhausting day for those young 4-H members. I don't think there's anything more mentally or physically draining than a 4-H achievement day when you have more than one project there. Mm-hmm. It's so much for our young people, and people don't, if you don't get to live it with your kids, you don't fully understand it. And I don't know why people want to inhibit the collaboration and, the togetherness and the bonding of our young 4-H members to put in rules like that.
Absolutely. I had a really super cool conversation with someone in the 4-H fraternity, and what they talked about with this was mostly beef and sheep folks. It's the projects where you have the opportunity to have a sale of an animal. And so what the comparison was is that these kids put in a premium effort. That's why they get a premium result. And I thought that was a really cool way to look at just exactly how much effort goes into this and why there's a lot of things that are okay with this, with beef cattle and grooming and showmanship and all of that. Because, there's some clubs that will say, to make it even, we're going to go dry brush.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think a lot of club leaders might not know is that dry brush shows or the use of no livestock products sometimes give those show kids a greater advantage. But at the end of the day, it's a premium effort for a premium result. How could we explain that to some of our leaders and parents that, this isn't a feedlot project, so we're halter breaking, we're getting them presented, we market them. So the whole thing is a bit different than a traditional fed calf project. How would you walk people through trying to think about that a little bit differently, that presentation, grooming, and all of that is okay? And it's fun. The kids really like it.
Well, I think this goes back to when they talk about real life or whatever. Well, you've joined 4-H though, right? It's not real life. It's, it is a different aspect of it. If you go with the market steer, the expectation is that you're going to, halter break them and you're going to show them. And so along comes all of that other stuff. Same in the market lamb. And it's not like, if you want to have a feedlot project or you want to go real life, then that's what you need to do, right? I mean, you can't change the market steer project because you don't think that it's real life. Or, that's the expectation, and that's what's been laid out from the beginning.
So an alternate option is they can always have a carcass project. That's a great project.
Yep.
Now tell me, I'm embarrassed to ask this, Trace, but can you have like a pen of 3 or 5? Like, is that a project that kids could do?
Sure it is. And last year there was a district that had a pen of 5 heifer project where the kids picked out 5 heifers, and I believe they weighed them in, and then about mid-May they had like a little pen show, because there was like 4 or 5 of these kids that took on this pen project, and they had a little pen show and they had a judge out to judge them, and they it was a pen of 5 heifer project, and it was really cool, right?
Creative.
Very creative. And it's not that hard to think of those things. Like, I don't know if this is the time, Trace, but we have that project that is, designed for kids that don't have the opportunity to have cattle, or they've moved away, or, like studies and stuff like that, where they can learn about industry stuff. And, if a creative leader can think of lots of things, there's the genetic testing, if you want to go that way. And then at every kind of goal that the 4-H member meets, so do a little mini project to show your members and your leaders. And, a lot of times those are the ones that are going to maybe create the most questions or whatever in the club, but just providing a whole different opportunity, because some kids really don't want to show a steer. No. And then I think that's fine. I've my own daughter didn't want to show a steer, so she showed just females for 2 or 3 years, and then took a steer, and then even in her last year it was just a female. The steer project wasn't her thing. And I think where we lose sight a lot of times is because there is the money at the end of the beef project and the sheep project, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's special in itself, for a lack of different words. And
but truly, from a beef project, the female project is what builds cattlemen and cattle herds. So that's kind of that's the cherry on top. I want to go back to a comment you said about judges, and this is something that you and I have had lots of conversation about in the past, is clubs that are picking judges and what constitutes a qualified or good judge. How do you access a list of these judges? and how do you decipher who's good and who isn't? So we talked about this a little bit before. So if somebody calls you and says, Tracy, I'm lost. Our judge last year was terrible. It wasn't good with the kids or good on the mic. Comments were not very professional. We need a suggestion. Tell us what you would recommend to people.
So I've been asked a lot of times to make a list of judges and, where's the list? And it's one of the hardest things to do because every year I think we have to remember that the people in the industry that we're asking to be judges, their life is changing, right? They, they've, for whatever reason. So to keep a ongoing list would be a real full-time job, right? Yeah. And the other thing is in order to keep that list relevant and good, you would have to be having feedback on them, on, their judging. And I think it really depends on your area, and the worst thing that I think somebody can do is put somebody in charge of getting judges that really knows nothing about what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you are on the judging committee, you really need to rely on some people with experience to help you find a judge that is qualified and works good with the kids. And there's a lot of them out there. We've gone through a generation of kids that have been taught to judge, through the show team judging competitions that are in a lot of our Breed Junior shows. So there's a lot of young people that are qualified. And it is hard to find, but usually in a general area, I can give you a list of 5 or 6 people that could help you out. But you do have to do your homework and you do have to pay attention to where that person has judged and look for feedback. Like if you don't know them, ask them, well, where have you judged before? And what, how did it go? Like ask the person that you're trying to get to judge, because their comments do matter. Their ring etiquette does matter. Professionalism. It all matters, right? Because these kids, like we've said, they've worked hard through the year. They don't deserve to be shunned or talked about badly, because there's people out there that will do a really good job. And
so I think that's about a myth buster too, is that you're having a steer show, you need a cattle buyer to judge your steer show. That's not necessarily true. And not all cattle buyers are built the same, and not all show ring purebred folks are built the same either. And so getting qualification is absolutely important. I have seen steer buyers or cattle buyers out there try to judge a female show that was a train wreck. I've also seen them do an amazing job.
Yeah.
So it is about feedback and getting some support. Okay, I want to talk next. So we were both involved with a program that had lots of moving parts. Huge volunteer committee, lots of stakeholders, a ton of kids, and we had a rule book that was 3 pages. And what we find is that clubs, districts, and regions want to add rules. And that by continually adding rules, it will strengthen their show, because they will have an answer for everything, and they will have a guiding principle for anything that could come up. I'm going to ask you to share with our audience today a different perspective about rule management and what has worked for you.
So even we get called out a lot about the beef standards, which is your very basic 4-H beef rules, and that there needs to be more rules there. And I don't like that, because then who's going to enforce them? The BAC committee or the PAC committee can only enforce so many rules, and who wants to be doing that? So a lot of those rules need to be made at the district or club level, wherever you're showing, but to keep them at a minimal, because it doesn't help to have a whole stack of rules. And eventually you might be on the side of making a rule that in 4 or 5 years affects you. And then all of a sudden your 4-H member can't participate or whatever. And so then you want to change the rule. So why can't we just have the minimum amount of rules? And when a problem comes up, why can't we as a committee get together, just have a quick meeting about this? Let's look at what's best for the 4-H member, what's best for the project or the program, and then let's move on. We don't need a rule specific for that maybe only happens once every 10 years or kind of like that. So our thing was, okay, if we deem that that rule is important enough to put in our book, which rule are we going to take out? Because we're not going to extend this another page.
Right. That's inventory management at its finest.
Yeah.
Kate, you also said something that I find really, really important too in this discussion is interpretation of so who interprets the rules and who enforces the rules. So that's another thing where parents love to contribute to interpretation and enforcement of rules. Mm-hmm. And we'd go back to whose responsibility is that? So when you're in, again, the heat of the day of Achievement Day, and there's a parent running around saying that there was parent participation here, or there was a professional here, or this kid wasn't doing what they were supposed to do. How do you manage that?
Parents get so wound up in the heat of the moment, right? And like somebody has to advocate for their kids. Like I get that. But why are you advocating stuff like that? Have we looked at the safety of it? Have we looked at, who is this helping and who is this hindering and, all of that. So let's just keep it simple because we don't need to make it more difficult.
Yeah.
And the enforcing part is huge. And I can give you an example of this because I had been on the back committee for years before I joined staff, like since the back committee was established. And when we first started putting in the rule about that you could only sell one 4-H project a year, because there were areas that were selling up to 2 or 3. And most people complied to it, but there was one place that didn't. And I had to go in there as a back member and enforce that rule. And that was not fun for a volunteer at that time to go in with staff and enforce that rule. And so that's why when people say, well, you should make that a rule. Well, I am not going to go out to enforce that. If you guys want that rule, you have to enforce it at your level. So you need to make that rule. If you think it's important enough, you need to make that rule.
And the consistency behind the enforcement of it. This is another thing that you and I have talked about before is so one person gets caught, but 3 people don't. Mm-hmm. So how do you enforce those interpretations when it hasn't been even Steven for everybody?
That's right.
So again, is the rule worth being in the rule book?
Being in the rule book, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, because there's clubs all over that will just do what they want.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so I make a rule and there's going to be some parents and leaders that are going to follow it to the T, and then the next ones aren't. Mm-hmm. And we don't know about it.
Yeah.
So let's not bother with it.
So related to that, and probably another one of the super hot topics that we often discuss is parent participation. And this one, in my previous involvement, we produced a jackpot show where there was no rules. I mean, that's a perfect time for your mentors or parents or whatever to get on their knees and fit a back leg together, do it together, watch how they're doing it, get coaching. You're in that moment. It's really, really cool to be able to do that together. And then you get to shows that are 0 parent participation. I understand and support the reasons for that as well. But oftentimes this parent participation rule can really be a bugbear for a lot of clubs. So share your perspective on managing that and how it relates to either safety or you're in it to win it, and the difference between the two.
Yeah, I love this question, right? A parent participation is something that it can be very gray. It absolutely can, but I think you hit it on the nail on the head when we have to talk about safety. You know, and realizing that there are some animals out there that little ones, or, you know, kids that maybe are lacking confidence, they need help with. So let's be mindful of that before we start accusing parent participation, right?
Yeah.
And then are we serious that a parent can't carry a bucket of water? Like, why isn't that okay? You've got a child. We've just talked about how exhausted these kids are at an achievement day, and they don't always think about watering animals if it's
or they're physically capable of it,
right? And so we're gonna get on a bandwagon that we're gonna kick this kid out because their parent carried a bucket of water. Like, that's not real. That's not realistic, I don't think. Parent participation, if you want to go so far as that, okay, so they cannot have a comb and a can of glue in their hand. Is it all right for them to be standing there saying, well, if you do this, this would look better? No, they're like, that's okay.
That's coaching.
That's coaching. And, you know, and how are we supposed to get better if they don't do that? If you have a child on a sports team, do they only show up to the game? You know, they go to practice twice a week in order to get better for the game. Well, unfortunately, not all 4-H kids have that opportunity to go to 3 or 4 practices before they actually get to Achievement Day. So let's say at Achievement Day, there's somebody there that is coaching. Let's just let that happen.
So back to the Mel Robbins thing and what Dustin and I talked about, let them. Because isn't that far more encouraging, like, for that family, for that member to have that than to be told, well, that person can't do that, I'm going to kick you out on their Achievement Day, where everybody is running at this kind of anxiety versus let's just talk about this in a kind manner. Yeah. That is so, I think, so key to managing opportunity, relationships, expectations, is stay calm. Is this going to help the member? Is it opening a door? Is it closing the door? And when they leave and go home after Achievement Day, will they look to your decision-making and respect you more? Who are you going to be a hero to by enforcing a new rule or a rule that doesn't even exist, but you feel that it to be right?
And safety is always number one, you know, because at Achievement Day is, like I said, everybody's emotions are running high. We have grandparents there. We have aunts and uncles and little cousins, and there's little people running all over. And, you know, some of these calves never see little people until they get there. And if a parent needs to step in or there is an unruly steer, let's be smart about it. Let's, you know, figure out if the steer really cannot be shown, then we have to come together as a group and say to this member and this family, like, you know, I'm sorry, we're scared somebody is going to get hurt. There's nothing wrong with saying that.
No.
Rather than losing your cool and kicking them out and making a big scene, let's just talk to this kid, right? Like, let's just make it nice for everybody.
You know, at one of our local Achievement Days last year, one of the steers the day before the sale blew up, got away, got frightened terribly, and they couldn't get him back in the barn. It was a safety issue. But the club really rallied together, and they put a couple pen mates in with him. He was in a 20x20 pen at the show, lots of feed and water. It was a fan. It was comfortable getting him calm, and they still sold him in the sale.
Yeah.
So instead of slamming the door that kid didn't complete the project appropriately and kick him out of the sale, a day before.
They work together.
Yeah.
And that's because we want the child to succeed at the end of the day. That's what it's all about.
So lastly, Trace, just going over a few popular things, and especially as it relates to the 5 commitments that the 4-H members make in the 4-H year. Often we get questions about 70% attendance. And I think it's important for clubs to identify at the start of the year what constitutes mandatory attendance that is related to the 70%. Would you agree? Or
yeah, I think that's the easiest way to do it, and then you've got no gray areas as to what it is that they were supposed to attend. So definitely to say, yeah, those 7 events are the 70%, and you have to make it to those. I think that's good to lay
reasonable.
Out right up. Yeah.
Another one is record books, and Hiller talked about this at a previous podcast where it's not their favorite. Some kids love them, some kids it's not their favorite. So our coaching to leaders is just do the best you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've done sessions about record books, different things at senior symposium, and so I've asked those senior members, what is it that you hate so much about record books? And it's just the fact that they have to do them. It's just like school, right? Like it's just the fact that they have to do them. But I say to them, you don't have to do them exactly what it's laid out.
Yeah.
You can pick and choose, or your club, and as a group of members, you can choose what parts of the book you think are important and what parts of the book need to be done. I said, what makes it harder is when a club or a district or region have competitions. And if you want to partake in the competition, well, then you have to follow the guidelines. But otherwise, there just has to be what you deem as a club to be a completed book.
I like that because you are always very open to creative options. And so I have heard through the grapevine that you are always working on tweaking and providing alternate record book options. So we'll stay tuned for that because there's lots of cool things coming. So really, I wanted to frame this podcast rules to remain in the neutral zone. Because if we think about athletics, we want to stay more in the neutral zone where competition, learning, growth, celebration, achievement can happen and do so in a safe and encouraging way. So keep in mind, we want to stay in the neutral zone. We want to be reasonable, rational, and thoughtful in all of our decision making. And Callan and Hiller talked about this previously too, it's the members club.
Yeah.
And if the parents and leaders are struggling to make a decision or they're deadlocked on an item, maybe ask the kids because they will have a really neat perspective and they might have the best, most thoughtful answer.
Yeah. And then it's their club.
Yeah.
Those are, decisions that those are ones they can make.
Final comments, Trace, on rules and what you would like to leave as a final thought to leaders in the province.
Well, we all know there needs to be rules, but, interpretation is a big thing. And we just have to remember the member at the end of the day, that we're trying to give our best experience to the member. But if there is a rule, then we do have to follow it.
Right.
Too. Yeah.
We're wanting to keep doors open, folks, and not close them. And with that, I want to thank Tracy Dietrich, one of our 4-H Alberta staff, responsible for provincial programming and resources and all sorts of cool stuff. Tracy, thank you so much for being here with us. You are a tremendous resource to our leader base and volunteers and show committees and chairs. And we're just so grateful that you provide an even-steven response to them and some good tips and tricks. So folks, we can't wait to share some more content in the next podcast. And in the meantime, keep on 4-H'ing.
Come on, let's talk 4-H, head, heart, health, and hands.
4-H!